guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Monster Families. Today we're going to be going over the Blunderbore, the Gorebelly, the Mauler, the Urdar, and whatever other names they have. They're a very interesting monster, and one of the most powerful revives that you can get as a necromancer because, well, not only do they do physical damage, but they also have the ability to crushing blow, which is pretty darn sweet. And on top of that, not only do they have the ability to crushing blow, but they also have the ability to stun. It's a rather unique and very interesting monster type. They also apparently seem to be in just about every act in the game except for Act 1. They first appear in tombs in Act 5, if you want to find them in Act 5. Act 2. They also appear in Durance of Hate, as well as some other areas in Act 3. They appear very often in River of Flame in Act 4. And they definitely appear in Act 5 as guest-type monsters. And lo and behold, what do you know? We have several Urdars already here to greet us. Now, the Urdars are demons, and they do take additional damage from demon bonuses as well as Holy Bolt and things like that. But in general, they're just really tanky, beastie melee fighters. They have really decent HP at 8,300 to 13,600. It's middling, but 13,600 is on the higher end, closer to the 20k, which is some of the higher monsters in the game, like the Act 5 monsters or Act 4 monsters known as regurgitators. The regurgitators, the evil ones that eat corpses and shoot them at you, have about 19,782. Of course, that goes up and down depending on how many player count you have and how they roll. But in general, they're pretty close to some of the higher HP monsters in the game. They also have relatively good damage output. Because they have Crushing Blow, they can apply that Crushing Blow to players. And 25% chance to Crushing Blow in Hell and 15% chance to Crushing Blow in Nightmare. So in general, they're going to take off a pretty decent chunk of your HP when they hit you no matter what, even if their physical damage might not be the highest. They also have a very interesting ability to be able to smite, which is something that I had to do a little bit of deep diving on. So if you look at Amazon Basin, sorry to blind everybody, it says monsters. The following monsters also use smite, although it requires a hit check, so it's not guaranteed to hit. It can be blocked, and the percent bonus damage is not applied. So what does this mean? Well, they're using smite, but they're not getting most of the bonuses of smite. So they're not getting the plus percent damage. They're not getting the ability to bypass a defense and things like that. But what they are getting is the stun chance, essentially, and the base damage of the smite. Now, if you look at the effect on Amazon Basin, the little graphic here, you'll notice that he actually is attacking with his offhand. He clearly has a weapon in his left hand, or rather his right hand, and in his other hand he has no shield, but he is definitely smiting with that hand. Now, I tried to find some information on how often they would potentially use smite, and on the Pure Diablo page, it does say that their chance of smite depends on difficulty and also their particular class. So the Blunderbore, for instance, which is the first one that you encounter in Act 2, has a 40% chance in normal difficulty to smite, a 50% chance in nightmare difficulty, and a 55% chance in hell. The highest tier version of it, which is the Urdar in Act 4, has a 70% chance to smite, which means that most of the time he's going to be smiting you and not actually attacking you. And maybe we can actually see this in action, like when they're attacking us. Because right now, see, they swing with their left hand, or their main hand. So you can clearly see they're swinging with their main hand. But occasionally they're not swinging with their main hand, and that's when I'm getting stunned. So I'm assuming when the stun happens is the actual smite. Although it's kind of hard to pay attention and see them smiting. I don't see anything now that I'm looking. I'm looking at the hand. Is the other hand attacking? Does not seem to be attacking. So maybe that graphic isn't necessarily correct. But you can clearly see some of the times when they are hitting me, I'm getting the stun effect above my head. And that stun effect is essentially indicating that they did in fact use a smite. It says here that their skill level for smite is level 1 in normal, level 4 in nightmare, and level 8 in hell difficulty. So they're getting essentially a 2-second stun in hell difficulty, They're getting a 1.2 second stun in Nightmare difficulty and a 0.6 second stun in normal, which might explain why sometimes they kick your booty cheeks because they end up stun locking you, which is kind of crazy. So not only do they have a stun that they can use and spam on you, essentially, they also have Crushing Blow, which also makes them kind of nasty, and they have decent HP, which is not bad either. The Blunderbores do have block chance, although there's no guarantee that they can actually block. So one of the things that I noticed with a lot of these monsters is they all have block chance indicated. However, whether or not they're actually able to block is dependent on whether the block is activated for that specific monster. But you can see that some of them have particularly high block chance associated of 42%. I wonder, honestly, since they're using smite, what shield they're actually using. Like, I don't know, is there a specific shield that they're using with their smite? It kind of seems weird because if you look here for the Urdar, it says 115 to 148 damage for their melee attack 2, which I'm assuming is their smite ability. And for their regular attack, it's 86 to 134. So their smite attack actually has a higher damage than their regular melee attack, which could be some indication of whatever shield they were using, maybe underneath the surface. Maybe they actually do have a shield equipped. And maybe that comes into play with their block chance as well. I don't know. Seems kind of funky. They do have particularly high physical damage mitigation, where the average is about 50% physical mitigation. They have 55, so they do have a really high physical mitigation. And with Stone Skin, they can easily hit 105, so they are sitting at immunity. So if you do come across a Stone Skin, Blunderbore, Gorebelly, Mauler, Urdar, they're definitely going to be immune. In Hell difficulty, with the Act 5 guest monsters, they're actually 75% resistant to physical. So definitely kind of like an anti-melee character. They're very strong melee. They stun. They have very resistant elementally to physical damage, and just kind of really nasty for melee fighters to go up against. They have no magic resistance. They generally have very high fire resistance in Hell difficulty, but none in the other difficulties. And some of them are immune to fire, like the Blunderbore. They generally have very high cold resistance in Hell difficulty as well, but generally none in the normal difficulty either, a nightmare. And the Gorebelly is immune to cold, and then the Mauler is immune to lightning, same sort of scenario where pretty high resistances across the board. It's actually kind of nutty because like even the ones that are not immune have 50% or 75% resistant to that specific element. Even the ones that they're not immune to. So the Blunderbores might be kind of a pain in the butt to deal with for anybody, since they're rocking 50% plus resistance to essentially every resistance except for poison. And speaking of poison, they basically have no poison resistance. Let's check the guest versions of the monsters because they may be different, but have no poison, 33 lightning, 33 cold, 33 fire. So they seem to be much weaker to elemental damage in Act 5 than their counterparts. So it sounds to me like if you're trying to get like a really tanky set of like Blunderbores, Maulers, etc., to fight against Ubers, which is a really good option, by the way, for like summoning an entire pack of Ubers and like stomping on somebody's head. It looks like the Urdars are the strongest elementally, like resistance-wise, and they also have like really nice physical resistance as well. Like in general, it kind of seems like the Act 4 Urdars are superior to the Act 5 versions. So you might want to, if you're trying to hunt down Urdars for your specific like Uber run, it looks like the Act 4 Urdars are probably your better bet. They have a higher percent chance to cast Smite, which has higher damage output. They have a higher like resistances overall to essentially all elements, and on top of that, they seem to be relatively available as well. I mean, it would just take a couple games for you to log in and log out and see the Urdars in Act 4, and then like there's tons of them usually whenever you get Urdars in the River Flame. So you can easily just run along and kill a bunch of them, get the bodies prepped up, and then summon them when you're about to do your Ubers. There's a nice little elite one right there. Blade Vex the Slayer. Which, by the way, when you resurrect revives, the minions actually do keep some of their modifiers. Not all the modifiers. Like, you know, they don't keep the aura or anything from the elite champion, but things like extra strong or like extra fast and things like that, those minions actually do keep the effects. So if you're hunting for like Urdars specifically to take out Ubers and you see an elite pack, it's actually a good idea to grab those specifically for your fight. I think that pretty much covers everything with the Blunderbores. Absolutely excellent revives, very tough melee monsters, and honestly, very high resistances as well. Um, Obviously, if you have the ability to reduce resistances, though, they're not technically immune to most resistances, so you should still be able to strip them down relatively easily. Like, for instance, this one has 75% cold res, but if you were a cold sorceress and you had, like, maxed out cold mastery, you're going to strip his resistance down to negative 100 with no problem. And that's going to go across the board for pretty much any character who's running large amounts of negative res, so you shouldn't have too much of an issue there. They're also not natively immune to physical, although they can be, of course, if they're stone skinned. So amplify damage will work really good to increase physical damage on them, which would definitely help out a ton. I do highly recommend that you don't get surrounded by them, though, as a melee character, because the stunning effect spamming on you can potentially lead to your death relatively quickly. And the spamming of the crushing blow on you, which kind of just like bypasses all of your mitigations, is also going to be a pain in the butt because it's just going to keep taking off huge chunks of your HP with every single hit that they land on you with the crushing blow effect. And you can see the crushing blow effect, by the way. Let me see if I could show you this real quick before we pull this video out. So if you pay attention to the top of your character's head when you get hit by an Urdar, you should be able to actually see the crushing blow happen. And let's see if I can lure one of these guys over to have some fun with me. Giggity. And I'm going to zoom in on my head so you can see it. It usually appears right here above my head, and you'll see the crushing blow effect actually occur. Of course, it might appear down here too. I did see the deadly strike bonus. That was the deadly strike. Boom, 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 boom. Of course, it would help if they could actually hit me, right? Hold on. Oh, God. My face. That was too much hitting. Just like permanently stunned. I'm seeing the deadly strike much more often than I'm seeing the crushing blow. To show you guys what the crushing blow looks like, let me pull it up real quick. If you guys have never actually paid attention, the crushing blow looks like this. So it's kind of like a red little explosion that happens, and it's only a 25% chance for them to actually apply crushing blow. And if they can't hit me, they might not actually be able to apply it, unfortunately. I have seen the deadly strike several times. Deadly strike is the circular one that you see that explodes outward. This one's a little bit more splattery. And they seem to be having much trouble smacking me and getting the crushing blow to happen. Now, the thing is, though, is that when you're a necromancer and you have an entire pack of these guys, you don't necessarily care, like, whether or not each individual one is applying crushing blow, because you'll have, say, 20 or 30 of them all in a pack with a 25% chance, and with 20 or 30 of them running with a 25% chance, you're going to get a significant number of crushing blow procs, like, per, you know, like, pack of monsters. I mean, just to run the numbers real quick, I mean, let's assume that you had 30 Urdars, and let's say only 10% of those, so let's say minus 90%, only 10% of those actually crushing blow to every single rotation. That would still be 3 crushing blows per rotation for 30 Urdars, which adds up to a lot of freaking damage over a really quick period of time, especially when they're attacking like multiple times per second, usually around 2.77 times per second. So you're talking around like 2.77 is 8.31 crushing blows per second. Which is a really fast rate at which you can kill the Ubers. Now, one thing that you do need to know is if you're using the Urdar method, you may still need to apply some sort of like anti-regeneration. It doesn't not necessarily required, especially if you have a large enough of monsters to cancel out their regeneration entirely. But it doesn't hurt to have some kind of open wounds in the mix. A mercenary with open wounds would be really useful. You could also potentially apply it yourself if you have like a bow or something to do it with. There are options, of course, on how you can potentially apply some sort of negative resistance. Poison damage could potentially be applied as well through a mercenary, or you could utilize Poison Nova. There's a couple different options for applying some kind of negative regeneration to prevent the monsters from regenning. When you have a really large army, though, it's not necessarily required, but having some kind of anti-regeneration will definitely make things go faster than otherwise. Poison Mage as well. So if you have one of the mages, although the mages tend not to last very long. Generally, when you're using the Urdar army method, you just want to Tele-stomp. That is the preferred method. And I can give you like a brief sort of scenario here with the Tele-stomping. Let me see what I've got on hand for this. I should have at least one necromancer. That is not a necromancer, that is a bowmancer. That one does not work. I got an actual bow necromancer. I don't even know if he has any minions, actually, now that I think about it. I don't think he does. I do not have an enigma with this character. Oh, no. Some sort of teleport is usually required for these characters to function properly. And, of course, I don't have a teleport at all. Oh, no, I do have teleport. I have teleport charges. Okay, that will work. All right, so let's go get an army real quick, and I'm just going to demonstrate for you what it's like to tele-stomp a monster so that you understand how the Urdar, like, monster pack functions. And we don't necessarily even need Urdars for this. I'm just going to go ahead and grab an army. And it might not even necessarily be a particularly strong army, but that's okay. So when you're fighting Ubers, like Uber Diablo or Uber Mephisto or Uber Baal or whatever, and you're trying to do it on a necromancer, what you're generally going to be doing is you're going to be basically tele-stomping directly on the monster's head. This allows all your damage to be focused on that target. So you would tele-stomp on the monster's head like this, and all of your minions would essentially be hitting the target at the same time. Now, of course, depending on your build, you might have a specific, damage outputs. You definitely want to make sure you're cursing the monsters and so forth and so on. And as you can see, even with a mediocre army that I currently have, which is only 10 skeletons and 1 minion, I'm still able to deal a significant amount of damage to Thresh Socket. But if you have an entire army of Urdars, like 30 strong, and you're also running a full skeleton army, which he doesn't even have, because a full skeleton army would be like 17 or so, as well as the mages, combined together with your mercenary, if you set him up properly with open wounds and, say, crushing blow and whatnot, you can absolutely obliterate like most monsters within the game just by simply tele-stomping on their head. And Thresh Socket is a more tanky, monster. If you tele-stomp on top of somebody's head who is not particularly tanky, like, for instance, this guy, he's just going to get absolutely demolished. Of course, he proceeds to then run away from the pack. Another thing about these is that a lot of the times they get stuck. So as you're teleporting, the large-sized monsters, specifically the Urdars, will actually cause the pack to get stuck, and they won't move out of that particular zone. So you'll notice that when I teleport, like for instance right now, as a regular necromancer with just like skeletons and whatnot, they kind of just like run away from my group, right? So it's not really necessarily a very effective front. However, if you have a large size monster, like for instance this Bloodbringer right here is a large size monster in the pack, like the Blunderbores are, it causes the pack to kind of get stuck in that particular location, which makes it more difficult for the monsters to get away. As you can see right now, as long as I don't move, the monsters, my skeletons, cannot get away because that particular large monster is locking them in place. And that's another part of how the Blunderbores work, is it essentially forces all of your minions into this, like, death ball. right? Because they're so large, and basically nothing can move outside of this death ball. So when anything approaches the death ball, anything that approaches it gets immediately hit by everything within the death ball, which is also pretty cool. I think that pretty much covers everything when it comes to the wonderful blunderbores. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you are enjoying the Monster Families content. And as always, keep watching.